Welcome to today's author event. My name is Emily McAvoy, and I am the Teen Services Coordinator for St. Louis County Library. Our event today is produced in partnership with HEC Media. Our event bookseller is The Novel Neighbor, an indie bookstore in Webster Groves with the best selection of young adult literature in the area. You can order a copy of our featured book at thenovelneighbor.com, and we so appreciate you supporting our author and our indie bookstore partner with your book purchase. Our author today is Dustin Thao. Dustin is a graduate of Amherst College with a BA in political science and is currently in a PhD program at Northwestern University where he studies critical media literacy. You've Reached Sam is his debut novel. Hi, Dustin, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we are so delighted that you are here. And could you tell us a little bit about what You've Reached Sam is about?
Yeah, of course. You've Reached Sam is a YA contemporary novel. It's my debut. It's a story of grief. It's a story about a girl named Julie who loses her boyfriend and she misses him. So one day she calls him just to hear his voice through his voicemail one more time, and he answers the phone. So they have this temporary connection and a second chance to say goodbye, and that's what the book explores.
What inspired you to write this story?
Well, You've Reached Sam, it took me a while to write. I kept restarting it over the course of a few years. I was working on other projects at the same time, but it was a story that I kept coming back to. It's a story that it has a premise that just I kept for a very long time. Well, to be honest, I feel like it's something a lot of us have thought about before, getting this chance to speak to a loved one that passed away. And, questions of that always played in my mind, what would you say? What might they say back? And I don't know, I always, it's because I held it for a long time and probably 4 or 5 years passed. And I dealt with my own experience of loss during that time. And I think those moments found their way into the book, especially through Julie and how she deals with grief.
And so in the story, you said that Julie, who is the main character, essentially, the story is told from her point of view. She's able to connect with Sam, who has died, through the phone. Who would you call if you were given a second chance?
Oh, I've actually haven't been asked that at all. That's a
Really?
very good question. Yeah. Wow. I guess I've never even thought to ask someone that because I can see how it can be very personal, but definitely, I mean, loss is a universal experience, even though we all experience it and go through it differently. I guess one answer I could give is during that time, as I was writing You've Reached Sam, I experienced one specific loss that kind of reflects Julie in a way. And it was with my best friend from high school. The thing was, we grew apart and we stopped talking for a while. And I guess in the back of my head, I always knew because, you move, things change. And then there was also some, being close friends. There's always some issues you might have that are unresolved and you kind of just stop talking to each other, right? It happens all the time, especially through high school. But in the back of my head, I always thought that maybe, I in my head, I knew at one point in time, she and I would be friends again. We'd visit our hometown, we meet up, get some coffee, and things will be back to the way they were. But unfortunately, she passed away. It was a bit of a tough grieving process because it happened so suddenly and randomly. It was almost as if it didn't really happen because I hadn't seen her for so long. So I went back and I read through all of our messages. I read through our texts. I read through our Facebook messages, especially because that's how we communicated at the time. And then I saw that she had actually reached out to me a couple of years ago, and I just didn't respond to her. And one of our mutual friends, she said that she wrote her a message anyway, and she sent it. And she said, "Why don't you do the same thing?" So I did. I went on Facebook and I responded and I sent it. And that was part of my grieving experience process. And so maybe if I had the chance, even if it's not to speak to her, I imagine that she read it somehow and that she got the message. And I guess that's what I was thinking of, like through times when I was writing You've Reached Sam.
What was the most challenging part of writing You've Reached Sam, and what was the easiest part to write?
Challenging, I guess, to me was my decision on like writing Julie in her portrayal of grief, because grief is a very difficult topic to write about. And Julie experiences it in a very specific way, and in a way that is familiar to me. You know, like we have our own ways of like in which grief manifests itself. And Julie kind of like shuts herself out from the world. She kind of disappears for a little bit, keeps to herself, and like attempts to like move on without really processing anything. And then so that was one of the decisions I made early on. I said, how do I write Julie? But I also like kind of I wrote Julie in a way that, like, Julie is not me, obviously. So you want to create distance from you and your character, right? But like pieces of you and your own personal experience always find their way into the novel. And in this case, like some of it did, you know, I try to make it as different as possible. But like that was a decision I made. And like, how do I portray grief in its raw form? And like, is that okay? Because grief to me, because often in media, we see like when explorations of grief, we see this like very simple, clean, like 5 stages that we all go through. And like there's a beginning and there's an end. But like that's not the case. That's mostly not the case. Like it's random, it's frustrating, it's slow, it's painful. And that's how I made the decision to write Julie. And I know Julie is a character that's not going to necessarily work for everyone. What I mean when I say it's like that was a challenging decision was Julie is kind of labeled, I guess, as an unlikable character now. And because it's a very, I understand, like it's a frustrating, slow process in which she moves through grief and ultimately finds her way out of it in the end. And so that was like the challenging in terms of like writing decision making that you do as an author. Easy, weirdly, I guess. Sometimes characters that you introduce to a story, they just come to you and they just like walk off the page and they're easy to write. And you could even write a whole book around a specific character. And for me, that was Sam's best friend, Oliver, in the book. And then when I introduced him as a character, I don't know why it came so natural, it came so easy. And then I remember sending it to my agent. And then she says, can you give me more Oliver? And then so I said, yeah, that's easy. And so I would write more Oliver. And then eventually we sold the book. And then we were going through revisions with my editor. And then she says, can you give me more Oliver? And I said, yeah, I can give you a whole chapter of Oliver. And I often see like in comments and like reviews that like people, you may not like Julie, but we like Oliver. And then there wasn't enough Oliver. And then so it's kind of like, yeah, I guess that's like Oliver, easy to write. If you asked me to write a whole book, I probably could.
Dustin, that is my next question. If you could write a book about any of the characters, like the friends of Sam and Julie, more in depth, that's my next question. And so Oliver would be your answer?
Yes. That's really funny. That's one of your questions. It's definitely Oliver. Like, I love Oliver. He is, well, without giving spoilers, of course, he might be one of the characters that didn't quite get that release in the end, right? Where things come together. Like, you know, his story maybe isn't 100% resolved in the way that like Julie might have and like other characters like Mika might have. So I think there's like a story there.
You've Reached Sam. It is for our young adult audience. Is this an audience that you always wanted to write for?
I started writing when I was, I want to say 17, 18, around that time. And the first book I write that I had mentioned for high fantasy was a YA novel. My second book is another YA contemporary. And at one point, I do want to move to maybe potentially contemporary adult like fiction, light science fiction. But yeah. So
you say that you still read YA today. Me too. Have you been influenced by either authors today that are currently writing or some that you read when you yourself were a teenager that have influenced You've Reached Sam or any other writings that you're doing?
Definitely, I have like things that inspired kind of like a path of like how where I wanted to write. I remember I am gravitated towards emotional stories, like anything that like I'm promised to make cry. Even sometimes it doesn't happen, right? Because like you can't make everyone cry. And like for me, for you, for Sam, if like 1 out of 10 people tell me they cried, like come on, that's pretty good in my opinion. But always remember like that my first experience crying in a book, and it was Bridge to Terabithia, and that has a huge impact on me because like it just like it really hits you, and then you don't know how like words on a page can make you feel a particular way. History is all you left me, I think, was another emotional one for me that I remember reading like years ago. That one had an impact on me too, dealing with stories of grief, like about moving forward. I even remember reading John Green's The Fault in Our Stars, was the one that everyone was talking about at the time, right? And then everyone's like crying over this. So like I read it, I was emotional, of course, and I definitely teared up like towards the end. I remember the moment at the end, towards the end, where I think Augustus dies, and then the main character, she doesn't know how to process it, and she kind of like goes back to his house, goes into his room, and lays on his bed, and then she calls him like she always does, and then goes straight to voicemail. And I don't know, like in my head, in like emotionally, I was like, just like pick up the phone, like what if he just picked up the phone, right? Because it's something like you always think about. And so I think part of that was like part of the thinking process of like what ultimately became You've Reached Sam was like, well, what if Augustus had answered? And what would she have said?
We've mentioned several times that You've Reached Sam is your debut. What has your writing journey been like? How did you get from having this idea and writing the book over several years to finally getting it published and to become an actual book?
I will say, like in terms of like someone who's never written anything before and who doesn't know anyone in the industry, I had a pretty traditional process in terms of like, how does a book become a book? How does a story become a book? But with a little bit of a twist at the end. And for me, I remember querying book one, the high fantasy, and over the course of like a little over a year. And I remember at that time, I not only did I not get rejections, I got no responses. I don't even think I got a rejection. So like, I didn't hear anything. So like that was like my experience with book one. And I said, well, like, I guess this is how publishing is. You query and pitch to agents via email, and then they don't even bother to respond, And then, which is a testament to how bad the book was, I'm gonna be very honest. And then I wrote You've Reached, like years, like a couple years passed, and during that time, I started to write You've Reached Sam, finish it at least in the stage that it was. And I started to query that too. And then again, I got, we were no responses or rejections. So I went back to school and I applied I planned to apply to graduate school, did one revision, had my friends read it, and I started querying again. And then I remember like getting my first request. And I was like, oh my God, like what's happening, right? And I was so excited. And I remember that agent. And then it ultimately became a rejection. But I knew in my head, I was like, I've never even gone to this point before. So like, we're getting somewhere, right? So I did another revision. And then, and I started getting, and then every now and then I would get another request, and it became requests becoming full requests. And then during that time, I kept list, and then the rejections became personal. And then they would tell me what they liked and didn't like. And I was like, okay, I'm really moving in like the right direction here. And then sometimes they would give great feedback. And I was like, what's going on? Like I would literally not even get a rejection. And then so I would just incorporate all of like their thoughts, and then I would work on the book. And then I remember getting my first R&R, which is revise and resubmit. And I was like, whoa, like someone's like kind of likes it enough to take a second look at it. And then this led me to going on Twitter and learning about pitch contests. Because I know about pitch wars before, but I hadn't heard of DVPIT at the time. And I said, well, what's DVPIT? And it's diversity focus. It's for marginalized authors and writers. I thought, well, maybe I could participate in a pitch and see where that goes. And maybe I'll get like agent interest. So as I was preparing, I got an email from another agent. And this one was different. This one, she says, hey, Dustin, I'm halfway through your novel and I love it. And I just want to let you know, like, just reach out early and let you know how much I love it. And actually, do you have any social media? Can I follow you? And I was like, what? And I was like, follow me. And I haven't used Twitter in years. It almost got me to a point where I just didn't want to do the pitch anymore. I was like, forget the pitch contest. I'm going to sign with this agent. It's like, we're a perfect match. Everything's going to happen in this particular way. And then I remember, I really sat down and thought about it. And I said, Dustin, like, how many close calls have you had? Right? I may have had the nicest rejection in the world, but at the end of the day, they were rejections. And it's been so many years. And I just don't put your eggs in one basket, and to just keep querying and put your work out there and hope for the best. And then so once I had that mind, I got out of the mindset of like, this is the perfect agent for me. And that's all that matters. Is I ended up finishing the pitch and I submitted it. I tweeted it and then I walked away from my computer. And then later on in the afternoon, it kind of blew up. And I was very confused because I didn't know like what a successful pitch looks like, right? But I had gotten probably over 100 agents and editor requests and likes and comments. And I was excited, but confused. And it was all mixed feelings of like, what's happening? Is this a dream? Like, why are so many people engaging with this tweet? And when I haven't tweeted in years, I was very excited. And then when I woke up the next morning, I got an email from that agent who had followed me on social media. And she said, hey, Dustin, I finished You've Reached Sam. And as I suspected, I loved it. Let's schedule a call. And the next day, I got my first offer from that agent. And then from that week on, like more offers came in. And then I was very lucky to like be put in this weird position that I never thought I would really be. And you think about it, right? In your head, and you don't really know how it goes. And you don't know how like it actually works. And by the end of like the 2 weeks, I made my decision. I went with that agent who gave me my first offer. And we actually sold the book, I want to say in less than 3 months.
To close us out, what do you have coming up? I know all of the press and the big publication, because November, You've Reached Sam comes out, but what you're working on and things like that.
I'm currently have a revision due in a couple of weeks. This is for book 2. It is another contemporary YA. It explores a lot of the same themes, explores themes of loss, themes of grief, but also focus on experience of loneliness. I currently comp it as Nina LaCour's We Are Okay meets WandaVision. So there are like hints of magic to it. And we're planning to announce it in January. Like we're still like getting all the pitch together and like working on the cover at the same time. So I'm excited to announce it. I'm excited like looking forward. But in my head, I want to say like, even though it's a standalone, I like to believe that it exists in the same universe and at the same time as You've Reached Sam. And who knows, for book 3, I could like try to do crossover. We will see. But like, that's like my secret plan.
So I just want to say thank you so much, Dustin, for joining us today, and to HEC Media and The Novel Neighbor. And remember, you can purchase You've Reached Sam at thenovelneighbor.com. And thank you all for watching today.
Thank you for having me. Can you hear me? He says. Julie? The ocean fades and his voice comes through more clearly. Are you there? I blink off raindrops. I must have played one of his voicemails by mistake, but I thought I deleted them this morning. If you can hear me say something, let me know if this is you. I don't remember that line from before, so this must be something else. Maybe I hit my head and I'm suddenly imagining things. My vision blurs. So I close my eyes again to stop the trees from spinning. I'm not sure if his voice is coming through the phone or my own head, but I answer it anyway. Sam? Silence fills the woods. For a second, I think he's gone, that he was never there, but then I hear a breath that isn't mine.